All right, let's go ahead and read the second part to this email that I'm titling What Happens When You Don't Slow Down. This person's dealing with depersonalization, panic attacks, several other symptoms because they literally push their body into the ground. Okay, I'm going to link part one below if you want to go and watch that. But we're going to be reading this last part of the email. He basically pushed his body beyond its limits in the form of working way too many hours. He wasn't eating right. He wasn't getting good sleep. And you can get away with that for a little while, okay, in the sense of you're not usually going to immediately overwhelm your nervous system. But just because you're getting away with it, there's like this lag effect, doesn't mean that you're actually getting away with it. It actually is false that you're getting away with it. You just think that you are, okay? Let's put it like this. Let's say that somebody, is eating way too much or like binge eating. And let's say that right now they're not overweight and they don't just immediately become, 500 pounds, let's say, okay? There's a lag. And the difference with that is with weight, like you can see it on the scale. With weight, you can visibly see it. But there are so many people that are just not aware of how stressed out that they are for a lot of reasons, which I'll try not to rabbit trail and get into that. But technically, fear is not an emotion. Fear is whenever you consciously become aware that your body is in fight or flight response and you have a sense of danger. So this is according to the neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux, who's the world's leading neuroscientist when it comes to fear and threat detection. And there was an experiment that was done where they had people sit down in front of TV screens and they subliminally flashed a picture of a snake or a spider. Now, a snake and a spider are what's known as an original trigger, meaning this is not a conditioned stimulus. If you are familiar with Pavlovian associations and Pavlovian conditions, or Pavlovian conditioning, this is something that all people are triggered by, going back to our ancient ancestors, which is important for this experiment. But anyway, they hooked them up to oximeter, blood pressure monitor, they're mapping what's happening in their brain. And they flashed the snake or the spider, and they asked them, hey, did you see anything? And they said no. They said, okay, do you feel any different than you did just a few minutes ago, right? And they said no. But even though they didn't see anything, subliminally, meaning faster than they can see, their blood pressure was going up. Their breathing rate was elevated. The amygdala in their brain was firing, which is part of what alerts the sympathetic nervous system that it's time to prepare the body for fight, flight, freeze response. So they were activated without awareness. And there are a lot of people out there that are actually pretty stressed, but because that stress has not escalated to the point of fear, which is whenever that threat response intrudes into your conscious awareness, that they don't think that they're very stressed. Another thing is, let's say fear does kick in and you become consciously aware of that. Well, if you're not self-regulating and you're not setting up boundaries in life and listening to your body, you're going to find a way to get back to homeostasis, even if that's through living in your head all day, even if that's through numbing the body. And if you are living in your head all day, which is what I did for over 15 years, and if you're numbing your body with all kinds of things, nicotine, alcohol, binge eating, drugs, you name it. I got beans, greens, potatoes, tomatoes, ham. You guys, let me know in the comments, you know what I'm talking about. No? Okay. Anyway, but basically, like, you're not going to be aware of just how much buildup there is. Okay. So like, for example, one of my clients right now is a therapist, and, we were talking the other day and she's like, I've never avoided anything. She's like, I still show up to work. I still go to the grocery store. I still do everything. So why am I still in symptoms? And I'm like, yeah, because that exposure is communicating safety to the nervous system, but because you're not in your body, like at all, and there's so much chaos in the body and so much fatigue and so much emotion, especially with her. We're working on releasing some emotion. that chaos within is overriding the signals of safety that are being sent to your nervous system from the exposure. Okay. I technically teach my clients 5 foundations of safety, meaning 5 massive things that we're doing to show your nervous system that you're safe. Think about it like this. Right now, there's a volume knob of threat, okay, at least perceived threat, okay, and it's turned up all the way. And what we need to do is we need to do things that show your nervous system that you're safe, which is like turning up the safety knob. And the more that you turn up the safety knob, the more that you will turn down the threat knob. Okay. That's really what's happening is your brain, body, and nervous system are preparing as if there's a threat. The symptoms are appropriate. They're normal for the state of your brain, body, and nervous system. Okay. That's why we don't need to pick apples off an apple tree. We need to uproot the actual tree. We need to show your brain and body and nervous system that there is no reason to be in fight, flight, freeze response, which are only appropriate if there's actual danger. Okay. And so if you have a symptom-centric approach, I'm not saying that you can't mitigate or even temporarily eliminate, but you're not going to get long-term recovery because you're focusing on something that is scary, is confusing, is frustrating, but is not the problem. Okay. So anyway, with that being said, she started, the therapist, you know, she started to build interoception, and she's continually telling me and the other members of my Rise program just how shocked she is. She's like, wow, Jordan was right. Like, I had no idea the amount of buildup that has been in my body and as well as emotion that I've been carrying around. And so anyway, with that being said, that's what ends up happening. So I wanted to just give a little bit, because this is a pretty short into the email. The bulk of the email was in the first video. So I just wanted to give you just a little bit more so this video isn't like 5 minutes long. So let's go ahead and read it. He said, at night, I'd lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, wondering what I did to myself. My mind wouldn't shut up. I'd Google things like world feels fake or watching yourself from outside. That's when I found the word depersonalization. So finding the word depersonalization or derealization or panic attack or even anxiety, although most people probably know what that is part of recovery. It's not recovery. Knowledge alone isn't going to get your body out of fight, flight, freeze response. But I remember whenever I finally came across the term depersonalization realization, it was in a book about panic attacks that I had bought because I dealt with symptoms technically 1 year, 2 times as far as depersonalization realization. And it was the second go. Actually, no, this was the first go around, actually, the first year. So this was like, you know, around 2008. And I finally told my dad, and I was terrified because I thought that if I couldn't figure this out on by myself, that it was essentially me kind of like giving up, right? Like I'm kind of disclosing to my parents, like, hey, I basically lost my mind. I didn't know what a panic attack was. I didn't know what depersonalization realization was. I didn't know about time feeling distorted or why that was happening or any of the other symptoms that I was experiencing. Sense of impending doom, especially the first go around, was a big one. Light sensitivity, eye floaters. I could go on and on and on. But I told my dad, I was like, I didn't even know what to tell him. I was just like, Dad, I feel really weird. I feel like I'm dying all the time. I had this fear of a heart attack. That was a really big one. And he said, okay. He said, you know, well, thanks for letting me know, son. It sounds like you're having panic attacks. And he said, you know, your mom used to have them, and, you know, nobody's ever died of a panic attack. And he actually used to be like a first responder, basically, for a job that he was at. And so he knew how to de-escalate panic attacks or whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is a panic attack? Okay, that's awesome. Like, obviously it didn't make me feel good, like, as far as the symptoms didn't just go away immediately. But for the first time, I actually had a term. And then I found a book online because now I had something to Google, and there was a lot, like 99% less information back then as there is now. But I Googled, you know, panic attacks, and basically this book came up. And I basically read it, and I remember coming across this little bitty paragraph about depersonalization realization. And it said, you know, it happens whenever there's a delay between this thing. I don't even think that it was accurate now that I look back. But I was like, oh my gosh, whenever I feel out of body and I look at my hands and they don't feel like my own, and whenever everything feels fake and dreamlike, like, oh, that's what that is? Okay, wow. This is connected to the nervous system. And so it is important, okay? It's not enough to recover, but whenever you don't have the right neuroscience about what's going on, your anxious brain is going to fill in the blanks. Okay. And part of what I do with my clients, and this is part of what I had to do too to recover, is we need to get the right neuroscience because it allows for something called cognitive restructuring, which is where you can go through this process of renewing your mind to how safe that your symptoms are. Because if you don't do that, your catastrophic anxious brain is going to fill in the blanks with all kinds of scenarios, like you're going crazy, things like that. Okay. So anyway, I'm really glad that this person found the term. Reading it was a relief and a nightmare at the same time. Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't crazy, but I also wasn't okay. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You're finally like, I'm not going crazy, but then you still feel terrible. So it's kind of like it lifts a little bit of the stress off, but you're still obviously overwhelmed in your body and nervous system. I saw people online saying it could last months, others saying years. I remember one post that said, it's been 12 years and I'm still waiting to feel normal. Yeah, I remember whenever I came across those posts, whenever I was suffering, people suffering for 20, 30, 40 years. And it was absolutely terrifying. And I assumed that was going to be me because, again, I had no knowledge about how subjective recovery is and the fact that a lot of people just don't have proper help with this. And so I panicked and I was like, okay, I guess it takes that long to recover, or just what if that's me? Even if some people do recover, my brain was so pessimistic. I was like, well, I'm going to be that one that doesn't, right? And so here's the thing though. Like, for example, I just signed up a lady to work with me in my RISE program who literally has been suffering for 30 years. And a big reason is because she has been going to therapists, which is great, by the way. I love therapists, but she's been going to a therapist, multiple therapists actually, that had a 20th century understanding of trauma, which depersonalization realization happened due to trauma, which is a state, not an event, a state of overwhelming stress in the nervous system. And they kept looking for an event, but with her, it wasn't a major trauma, which is a single situation that overwhelms the nervous system. It actually was complex trauma. It was repeated stress and adversity over a period of time. And so she never had an event. She didn't have a car accident, loss of a loved one, going off to war, any other singular situation that caused her nervous system to be overwhelmed. And so I think one therapist, she spent 6 years just showing up every single week looking for an event. And so once she started watching my videos, I talked to her about complex trauma, which is like, I got this giant water thermos here, but anyway, it's like filling up a cup of water over time. It's not one singular situation. And that really started to be a breakthrough for her. And then also understanding the impacts on the body was very, very important for her. And that's a lot of the work that we're doing right now. And she's starting to have some pretty cool results already. And it's just been like a week. So, but anyway, with that being said, let's continue. He said, I sat on the floor and just cried after reading that. The next day, I told myself I'd stop looking. That lasted until 11 p.m. Yeah, so it's kind of like an addiction because dopamine, which is like the feel-good motivation chemical, is released whenever there's the expectation of a reward, okay? The thing about forums and YouTube comments and Reddit and different things like that, Facebook groups, is it becomes a dopamine addiction because you may find somebody that validates your experience and explains things exactly like what you're experiencing with symptoms. You may find somebody that, overcame the symptoms, or you also may find somebody that didn't, and that's the problem, okay? It's like you're living off the dopamine of finding somebody that can explain your experience and that overcame the symptoms. That was me. But in the midst of that, you accidentally end up making things worse because you come across people that are still struggling after a long period of time and may even be discouraging as far as other people overcoming the symptoms too. And don't think that they're bad people. They're just speaking from their own subjective experience. In fact, it literally was like yesterday, somebody commented on my video and they were like, yeah, just give it time and it'll go away, and I didn't allow that comment to be approved because that's not true for most people. Okay. Like, well, I say that, at least a lot of people, okay? That was their experience. In fact, I get comments all the time, and I'm not trying to, push any buttons here. I'm saying this as a Christian, like a Bible believing, Christian who loves Jesus. Like, I am very passionate about my faith. I never talk about it on here, except rarely, because I just want to respect the fact that not a lot of people, or I don't know who's a believer, who's not a believer, and you don't have to be a certain religion to recover. But I have comments all the time that say, hey, just believe in Jesus, just pray, just read the Bible, and your symptoms will go away. I'm literally working with like 5 Christians right now that are some of the most amazing Christians that I've ever met, that prayed, read their Bible, went to the altar at church, and it wasn't enough. And that's because we're dealing with natural issues here. And this is a whole nother video. I don't want to talk too much about this, but if you don't believe in God, that's totally fine. But let's say that God is love and he wants to help people, but he also really likes faith, which is another way of saying trust. What if he chose to move in such a way and interact with humanity in such a way that you had to have trust that it was him? If God just showed up directly and got rid of all your anxiety and all your panic and all your DPDR, you don't really have to have faith, do you? I'm not saying that he can't do that, and maybe he does that for some people, but most people, he's going to send people into your life to help you. God uses people. That's my opinion. And what if God wants to send people into your life to help you deal with the things in your body and in your life and give you a lot of encouragement along the way as you're doing that, right? I tell people, whether they're a Muslim or a Hindu or a Christian, let's just focus just on God for a second, instead of getting into the nuances of that. Like, let's say that you were, 100 pounds overweight, and you prayed and you said, God, I really, just want you to take this weight away from me. Like, you probably wouldn't, right? Because you understand that it's just a buildup of fat in the body that you need to exercise and, change your diet. And there might be some other psychological things going on, but maybe, God would send you a nutrition coach or a fitness coach, right? But yet for some reason with anxiety and panic and depersonalization, realization, it's like it gets over spiritualized. It's like people don't understand that just like losing weight, there's a lot of things happening in the body, okay, that need to be dealt with. There's a lot of stress weight, you could say, that we need to do body-based approaches and lifestyle adjustments to address this. It doesn't mean that it's not God showing up to help you. It's just he's using people to do it. And that's usually how he works in my experience, okay? So anyway, that's a whole nother topic, and I try to stay away from politics and religion and stuff. But just if you're somebody who believes in God, who follows me, and you're kind of wondering what my take is on that, that's what it is. I think God uses people. He loves people. He wants them to be free. Like, last thing I'll say is, you've heard on the movie The Pursuit of Happiness, there was a little boy who was drowning and he was crying out to God, please save me. And then a canoe shows up, a guy in a canoe, and says, hey, let me save you, right? I'll make room in the canoe. And he says, no, God will save me. And then a plane shows up, a helicopter shows up, and the boy keeps saying, no, God will save me. He dies, goes to heaven, and he's like, God, why didn't you save me? And God's like, I sent a canoe, I sent a plane, I sent a helicopter, And I think that's a perfect representation of what happens. I cannot tell you, and again, I'm just one of many people that God could use to help somebody. I can't tell you how many people that prayed that God would help them, and then a few weeks later, they found my videos, okay? And it's happened hundreds and hundreds of times at this point. And so it's like, that's just my opinion about this. But let's go back. Just because something worked for somebody doesn't mean that it's going to work for everybody. And that's why there's so many people out there that are saying that this thing's the cure, this thing's the cure. And it appears as if there's like 10,000 cures. Number one, there's a lot of layers to this. So I don't even like the cure language, because it implies that there's going to be one thing that's going to just make this go away. But you have to remember neurodiversity. Everybody has a unique nervous system and a unique brain based upon their own unique history. And different people have different things that are stressing out their nervous system. Yes, there are general things that we need to address that will help everybody, but there's a lot of unique layers to this. There's different levels of consistency. Not everybody is as consistent as other people. But just because one person did something to help their symptoms does not mean that it's going to help your symptoms. And just don't let that confuse you, because that's why. Okay, that helped their nervous system and their situation at that particular time, right? And so, and again, that's a whole nother video, but I'll move on. I started trying to fix it myself. I thought, okay, if overthinking caused this, I'll just keep busy. So I worked more, stayed later, took every shift I could get. I kept a vape in my hand 24/7. I told myself nicotine helped me focus, but it really just gave me something to do with my anxiety. When I was busy, I didn't notice the fog, but the second I stopped, it came back heavier every time. Yeah, I mean, if you follow my channel, which there's a lot of new people actually that are starting to watch my videos, which is really cool. Welcome, by the way. So I feel like I'm talking to people. I'm used to talking to people that have already seen my videos, but you may not know a lot about, my opinions on some of these things or my story. But, distraction is literally opposite of what you want to do. Okay. Distraction is somatic dissociation. Somatic means body. Dissociation means to separate. So it's basically a way to see results by way of numbness. You're basically becoming so detached from your body that your brain doesn't need to dissociate from your body in the form of depersonalization, or becoming so detached from your life that your brain doesn't need to dissociate you from your life with derealization. And yeah, it does work for some people, but it's not a long-term solution. It's not going to truly get you out of this in the long term. You have to deal with the things in your body as well as things that you need to face in your life. And I actually remember speaking with somebody who, they were taught this distraction stuff. Like, there's actual programs out there that teach this. And they basically became a realtor, and they were working like 14 hours a day and just never taking any breaks because they were taught, I've got to distract 24/7. And they were also taught by that same person, which will remain nameless, but because I really do respect that person a lot overall. I disagree with the methodology, but they were also told that you can't research, you can't look to anybody else. And so they were terrified that they wouldn't recover if they looked to anybody else. So it took like years and years of them just driving their body into the ground, and just being exhausted before finally they're like, I don't care, I'm going to look for other things. And that's whenever they came across my videos. But yeah, distraction is definitely literally opposite of what we want to do. We do want to have a healthy focus, but we want to include the body. Okay. It's one thing if you're, focusing on personal development and, tapping into your potential and setting goals for yourself and working on them, and you're starting to stay in tune with the body and self-regulate and have self-care. But if you're just throwing yourself into whatever you can think of, video games or this thing or that, to just distract, like you're not moving forward. You're actually moving backwards. You're basically learning to feel better by way of staying out of your body, okay? Which is opposite of what we want to do. Showering, brushing my teeth, laying down, all of it became minefields. Stillness felt like danger. I'd hear my own heartbeat and panic. I stopped seeing friends. Conversations felt fake, like acting. I'd nod and smile, but inside I was just checking. Do I feel real right now? No. Maybe now, no. Yeah, that's one of the most debilitating things about dealing with symptoms that are internally devastating but don't necessarily manifest externally is you could be going through absolute hell on the inside and feel like dying, and yet on the surface everything looks fine. And people look at you and they're like, well, you look fine. But yet, especially with depersonalization, realization, you literally feel like you've slipped out of reality. You literally feel like your body is not your own, and you feel like a zombie. But yet you're just kind of going through the motions, and you're kind of smiling and, just kind of emulating the mannerisms of normality. But on the inside, you literally feel like death. And so a lot of people don't take the symptoms as seriously as they should, as far as the people around you, because they look at you and they're like, well, you look fine, not understanding that especially if depersonalization realization has shown up, you are literally in the freeze response, which is what happens right before you get eaten by a lion. Like your brain, body, and nervous system are literally preparing for you to die. Not saying that you are dying, but I'm saying this is the response that happens whenever you're unsuccessful with fighting or fleeing and you go into the freeze response, which technically is a mammalian defense mechanism designed to convey to a predator that you're dead. So it loses interest and walks away. But just in case it doesn't walk away, you're going to start to experience symptoms that are designed to mitigate the pain of death. One of them being depersonalization realization. Your brain shuts down the mohawk of self-awareness, which is a series of brain structures that are responsible for you feeling connected to your body, yourself, and the material world. Because if you're being eaten by a lion and you're very separated from your body and from the material world, you won't feel it as much. It's like nature's last gift. If you're going to be eaten by the lion, you might as well not feel it, right? And so they're literally death symptoms. You can feel like death and yet on the outside look completely normal. And so if you're the loved one or somebody around the sufferer of depersonalization realization, you need to understand that just because they look fine, it doesn't mean that they are fine. And they are going through things that are impossible to describe with words, but are literally the most terrifying thing that somebody could probably experience. Okay. So anyway, with that being said, that is it. So I hope that I've been able to encourage, educate, kind of speak to, the mistakes that people make. If you're wanting to know the 5 shifts that you need to make to eliminate depersonalization, realization, anxiety, and panic attacks, I've created a free 5 shifts masterclass for you. This will walk you through the 5 shifts that you need to make, highlight, many mistakes that people make, kind of go more in depth with that, show you some self-regulation skills. It is actually going to help you. Yes, at the end, there is an option to apply to work with me and my team. If you'd like to pursue mentorship with me in my Rise program, where people are literally destroying these symptoms every single day, that'd be awesome. I'd love to take a look at your situation. Okay. You apply, and then after that, there's a call that you'll speak with my team. I'm too busy to take those calls, but I've trained a team to know what to look for as far as if we can help you. We can't help everybody, but we'd definitely be happy to take a look at it. Okay. And the purpose of this channel is to equip you with the things that you need to know to recover, regardless of who you work with. Human to human, life is short. I want you to feel better. Okay. So anyway, with that being said, click like, help me get this out there in the algorithm, and also subscribe, join this channel if you are not a part of it. And I think that's it. Enjoy your weekend if you're watching this on Friday, October 10th. If you're watching in the future, I hope you have a good day, and talk to you soon. Thank you so much.